Hello, my name is Kyle McCrone. I'm here with Wyatt Mullen, and you're listening to a special episode of Cascadia Mountain Weather. We've been having some crazy weather lately, so we decided to have an extra video this week where we can look at the storm that's already hit and also the upcoming cold weather that I think everyone wants to know about. Is it going to snow in the lowlands? How cold is it going to get? So to start, we're going to look back at what's been happening over the last few days. And the most notable thing is a crazy mountain storm and actually a blizzard. So here's a video showing the conditions over Stevens Pass today. We're talking about 60-mile-per-hour winds, cold temperatures, blowing snow. Both Snoqualmie and Stevens are shut down at various points today. There's been avalanche control. Next, we're going to look at, this is the days since the last blizzard warning. We've been over 4,000 days since the last blizzard warning issued in Western Washington. That's 2012. So this is pretty, unprecedented, extremely uncommon for it to be like this windy and snowing this hard. So, really crazy weather we're seeing. Here's a webcam of Crystal, like the webcam's just like covered in snow. Like you can't even really see anything. It's been snowing so hard out there. So this, next graph is just going to show like estimated snow depths over the last 72 hours. I think this actually really underestimates it a little bit, but the general story is most areas in the Cascades Olympics have seen 2 to 3 feet. Probably the higher terrain is more like 4 feet. So, for a lot of areas, this is as much as snow as they've received almost all season. Wyatt put together this snow report, and you'll really see, looking at 24-hour and 72-hour totals, that it's increased a lot for the different areas. So, for example, Stevens Pass has gotten 35 inches in 72 hours, 24 inches in 24 hours. Then, Hurricane Ridge went from basically 17 inches to 42 inches. They've more than doubled their depth. Baker has almost doubled its depth. Snoqualmie has almost doubled, and Snoqualmie still is just slightly ahead of Baker, which is very impressive. And I think it's also important to realize that like these snow depths and the snow accumulation, this is just at Snoqualmie Pass. I was up in the Snoqualmie backcountry this weekend, and there was only reported about 9 to 11 inches at the pass overnight. On Friday night, there was easily 16 to 18 up at 5K. So if you go up a few thousand feet from these locations, you're probably seeing 50% more snowfall. And with the strong winds in certain aspects that are loaded, you might see 3x that. So really, really high snow totals. This is definitely one of the more impressive storms that I can remember. We're going to take a look at a little bit of eye candy here, the data. This is Mission Ridge ski area. So it's over in Wenatchee, kind of the drier side of the Cascades. They've still picked up, 8 inches of snow. But the main thing to highlight is look at those wind gusts. We had multiple wind gusts of over 100 miles per hour, 112 miles per hour today. That's just crazy. Like that might be like breaking things. And here is an Alpental graph for the last, few days. And we have had very strong precipitation. And also kind of an interesting influx of warmer southwest wind and southwest air earlier today and yesterday. And that briefly transitioned to freezing rain. So you can see actually the temperatures inverted here, where the summit of Alpental became warmer than the pass, which was stuck with that cold air. And whereas areas on the west side, like Baker and Paradise, they saw full-on rain during this storm for a few hours. So Snoqualmie never quite saw rain, but probably freezing rain due to this inversion in the cold air sitting there. And now we've switched back to like nice colder northwest air aloft. We have a huge temperature gradient between the summit and the base, which is really good for snow quality. And it's just dumping. I mean, look at the precipitation rates per hour. I think we've been seeing 0.3 of an inch in an hour, which if we take a 10-to-1 ratio, that's 3 inches of snow in 1 hour. I mean, that's exceptional. So now let's move on to, I believe this one is Timberline at Mount Hood. So Timberline was barely skiable a week ago over on Mount Hood, and their snow depth has gone from, I think, around 30 inches to 70 plus in just a few days. So talk about turnaround. And then the last one, we're just highlighting that, with all this snowfall, it's really exciting to get out. Northwest Avalanche Center is doing a great job of putting out forecasts, And obviously, the avalanche danger is pretty high, considerable and high in most places due to all the recent snowfall. And even after these storms end, I would expect avalanche danger to remain pretty touchy because this colder temperatures won't allow the snow to settle as much. There's definitely a lot of potential for wind events and further, uncertainty in the snowpack. So keep your head on a swivel and definitely follow along the Northwest Avalanche Center if you're looking to get out in the backcountry. So next, Wyatt's going to talk about like what we're looking at in the next few days, because I think that's why a lot of you guys are probably here.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight a little bit kind of some of the uncertainty. One of the things that happens when we have these big storms that are approaching, especially things that are related to snow, is that the models go a little bit haywire. They kind of will forecast like the most extreme thing you've ever seen, and then that fades as you get closer. And it's really because you have this really strong battle between like the Pacific, which is pretty moderate, generally likes to give us like 40 to 50 degree rain. And then kind of cold temperatures up in the up in like interior British Columbia, which can be -30, -40 degrees pretty regularly. And so they kind of come like when everything aligns correctly, you get the cold air that comes down into kind of our area, and maybe you get snow. So I just wanted to highlight, this is from earlier today, kind of the model run. This is the European model, showing like a little bit, so looking down here, Seattle down here, it's showing a little bit of snow for the next kind of like 5 to 6 days. But not a ton of snow in Seattle, a lot more snow down towards like Portland and stuff like that. And like compare this with the GFS, which is the American model. And this is at, run at the same time, supposedly with the same input data, and showing just like insane amounts of snow, not only for the like the mountains, which are getting dumped on right now and could get more dumped on, but especially down in like the lowlands as well, like 20 plus inches in the Seattle area. So kind of interesting to see this really extreme contrast. And you can also see that on the model right here. So this is the temperature forecast for about 5,000 feet. This is 850 millibar temperature. What I want to highlight is this is looking out just like 2 days from now, and the crazy amount of spread that we see where there's 10 degrees Celsius, maybe even 15 degrees Celsius in spread between the between kind of the warmest model, the warmest ensemble. This is like ensemble members. So you perturb them slightly, or you have slightly different kind of physics that are put onto all of these models that are not quite as high resolution as kind of your main model that you run. But this highlights kind of the spread and the uncertainty. If you see larger spread between your models, then you know that there's less certainty with what is going to happen next. So we can see that it's very tight, pretty nearby, pretty soon. And then as we get further out, it spreads. But this 2 day is like pretty incredible. And then I just wanted to highlight this. This is looking for precipitation. And this can be a little bit hard to understand, but what I wanted to show is that like the European doesn't show very much precipitation for this weekend's time frame if we compare that with the GFS, right? The GFS shows extreme amounts of precipitation, significantly higher than the European model, which is why we're seeing significantly more snow. And that still isn't completely settled, but I will say that most of the models seem to be a little bit colder than the GFS, which means that we generally send the precipitation further south. So that means that it might be better for Portland and the Oregon Cascades, but the Washington Cascades might not see nearly as much snowfall. So I just wanted to highlight like some of the stuff that we might be seeing as we go forward. This is looking kind of at the NWS point forecast for Bellingham, showing like, look, we're going from pretty standard January conditions, highs in the 40s, lows in the 30s, and pretty quickly we drop off a cliff. Temperatures like teens, probably seeing some single digits, and highs like low 20s. We can go to Seattle as well. And they're not quite as aggressive in Seattle, but honestly, I think that there's a chance that we might see one of our lowest high temperatures in like the last 5 to 10 years. wanted to highlight just kind of some of these, like, right, this is supposedly the high temperature on was it on Saturday. And so showing like pretty consistently, and this is from the European model, showing pretty consistently temperatures in the 20s up here, maybe even colder because down near Portland, where they have access to the gorge and the really cold temperatures on the east side of the Cascades. Here's another, this is kind of a different perspective, but looking at the European model showing like, once again, kind of single digits, maybe teens down near Seattle. This is one model run. I wouldn't say that take any of these numbers as gospel, but just like be aware that like likely it is going to be getting quite cold, probably teens for Seattle, single digits up near Bellingham and north of Seattle in the outlying areas. Portland's a little bit less clear, and the mountains are going to be absolutely frigid, like probably negative single digits, negative teens, maybe. Even at the highest peaks, you might be in the negative 20s. This is honestly one of the colder air masses that we've seen in the last decade, if not the last like 30 to 40 years. So just be aware of that, and it's going to be like very, very cold. So I wanted to highlight this. The question is like, in the coming days, we still aren't exactly sure what's going to happen. Actually, I will highlight this first. So what this shows is this shows the temperature and kind of the winds at about 1,000 feet. And what I want to highlight is as we look up here in this in the upper portion of the image, you can see the cold air starting to stream out from the Fraser River Gap. And we get this Arctic front that moves through and brings temperatures that are below freezing down to Seattle eventually and further south. And don't look at like the time, like when this is occurring per se, that's not super important, but it is kind of interesting to see those cold temperatures. And generally with that, what we see is we see some snowfall that develops along the Arctic front. So this is showing kind of the GFS version or the WRF, which is the high resolution version of the GFS specifically for like Washington area. And it shows some snow perhaps forming along this Arctic front. So it's really hard to say how much. Almost always they have a little bit of snow, but whether it's like flurries or whether it's accumulations, it's hard to say. I think that like many areas could see anywhere from like a trace to 3 inches. This would probably be sometime on Thursday, going into Friday. So it's not going to be like a mega dump of snow, but there's a good chance that you could see a little bit. This is showing kind of the accumulated snowfall for different areas and like maybe kind of 2 to 3 inches in some areas, especially north of Seattle. Not showing a ton near Seattle, but these features are really, really hard to model because you have all this terrain and all the water. And it's like the cold air goes over water, you can get more snow. So just be aware that there is the chance of snow on Thursday into Friday. And then and this also just kind of highlights those cold temperatures coming out from the Fraser River Gap. So we start kind of here and like around freezing. And then as we go further and further, you can see this cold tongue of air with temperatures in the teens and even the single digits coming out from Bellingham or from the Fraser River. Going further, this is Cascadia Mountain Weather, and we like to talk about the weekends. As I mentioned, it's really, really uncertain, but kind of the general trend in models is to have some pretty cold temperatures east of the Cascades for the weekend and relatively dry conditions for especially up near like Seattle. Down south, there might be a ton of snow. But near Seattle and like the Washington Cascades, it might be pretty dry. And this is going to lead to a pretty strong east wind event. So if we look here, these are the contours of like constant pressure, and you can see how they're kind of piling up against the Cascades. This leads to really strong gap winds through Snoqualmie Pass, through the gorge, through all the passes. And so just be aware of that like if we are like quite cold and dry, then we'll probably see pretty strong easterly winds and cold temperatures as well. This is looking a little bit even further afield. So this is kind of Monday evening, where the upper levels have actually warmed pretty significantly in Western Washington. while in Eastern Washington, they're still pretty cold, and that actually keeps us cold. So if we look at the ground temperatures right now, we see that we're still below freezing, even maybe for the highs, or around freezing, even if the upper levels are above freezing. So kind of a traditional inversion.
So we'd like to take a moment also just to thank all the Patreons that are supporting us. For $5 a month, these people are getting access to exclusive recreation recommendations every week. So if you're trying to make sense of like a complex weekend forecast, on Thursday or Friday, we'll put out our best recommendations for where we see good opportunities, and we do this throughout the year. So it's a great opportunity to learn a little more in depth and also support what we're doing here. So this has been a special weather episode. If you want to check out our Patreon, you can go to cascadiamountainweather.com. We'll also include it in our show notes. That links to our Patreon page. We plan on probably also doing a regular video on Thursday or Friday in preview of the weekend. So it's been super fun to talk about this wild weather. Exciting that winter's finally arrived. We hope you enjoyed the video, and subscribe and watch next time. Thank you.